And now,
Ladies and gentlemen,
Please fasten your seatbelts.
Welcome to PreneurCast
Business cards being swapped, beers being drunk.
Can I say a nasty word? Can I say procrastination?
with Pete Williams and Don Gosher.
how well did that go down?
Talk about that entire thing in a very another rant and soapbox episode if we want to.
Visit us online at PreneurMarketing.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of PreneurCast with me, Dom Goucher, and him, Pete Williams.
Hello, sir.
Hello, welcome everybody. And this week we've got a little chat that Pete had coming up for you with a guy called Joe Cross, who made the most fascinatingly titled film called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, which is quite intriguing. And we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. But before we do that, let's do a usual roundup. What's been going on, Pete?
Oh, mate, it's been a good week or so since we last caught up, and a lot's been going on. We're in the process of, you could almost say, jumping on the sales funnel bandwagon. Obviously, there's been some courses released for some friends of ours recently around sales funnels and the need to automate your sales and things like that. And something that kind of occurred to me is that, funnily enough, in the Preneur Group side of the enterprises that I have my sticky fingers in, there isn't any real automated funnels going on. It was quite funny is that, you know, we have the community, and obviously we make offers to the community and help them grow their business in a number of ways through that, but there wasn't really a systemated sales funnel going on, funnily enough. Over time I've sort of, molded stuff, but at the present there wasn't. So started to really reinvestigate that and start building some out. So we're building out a sales funnel around the outsourcing program that Davey J and I have, with some really cool entry-level products and stuff like that, which I'm super excited about. Doing one around the publicity programs that I've had, that some of you may have already invested in and had some huge successes with. And also doing one around the MCG project, because obviously I still have a little bit of carpet and some timber and stuff available. So going to sort of do one last push, but make it an evergreen launch as opposed to a traditional sort of time-based launch. Now, obviously, I think most people who are part of the Preneur community would have absolutely have received the email about how we resold the MCG about 3 or 4 years ago with a product launch, and how we did, a good 5 figures in the first hour of sales, and we sort of break down that whole launch sequence, the swipe file of the emails we used, as well as breaking down why we wrote each email the way we did. So there's actually some learning in there as well, not just a swipe file. We actually understand the psychology behind the swipe file. And we'll link up to that video in the show notes as well. So if you are interested in sort of looking and dissecting a launch for a non-information product, it's definitely worth watching the video and downloading the PDF and things for that. But we're now turning that into an evergreen launch. So the sequence is going to be, you opt in to pre-register to own a piece of the Melbourne Cricket Ground. Obviously, that's the offer. There's not going to be an exchange of information. It's not going to be a report or anything like that. It's simply pre-register to have the ability to own a piece of the MCG. We think that is a good enough exchange of value for the opt-in. And then on the thank you page, we're going to make a instant offer, or a tripwire offer that it's often known for, which is like a cheap entry-level offer, which will be for some certificates with the history of the MCG and a piece of the timber for around $27. And then there'll be an instant upsell on the back of that to a handcrafted pen made of authentic MCG timber for about $130. And then whether someone takes those upsells or not, they'll get sent a series of emails in an evergreen launch sequence over a 6 or 7 day period, which will lead up to the ability for that person to invest in the MCG carpet frame, the real pinnacle piece of memorabilia from the MCG there. So that's kind of the high level funnel that we're rolling out, and we'll break it down on the blog and sort of show you exactly how that particular funnel is working and how we built it out as we do. But they're kind of the 3 big funnels we're working on at the moment, which is really exciting to sort of actually see some of this automated stuff and really let the team run with these projects as well, which is super exciting.
Cool. As we always say, I mean, the initial funnel, the sequence, there are elements of that we always talk about as part of the 7 levers.
Absolutely.
And knowing what your funnel is vital. Having some sequence of events, which we is the basic terminology we use for a funnel. It gives you give you some visibility of what's going on, gives you places you can measure, things you can improve. So there's a lot more to it than we're just going to do this. There's always that optimization that we can come back and look at later on, and that's probably going to be just as interesting as what you do, right?
Oh, I think so. And we should definitely, not only obviously as we're going to do, really break it down step by step on the blog at PreneurMarketing.com, but also we should do a podcast episode one day about how sales funnels and the 7 levers tie in together, so people can really see how those two, I guess, frameworks or tools to help a business can actually integrate, and where they do cross in their integers, I guess you call it. So we'll do that as an episode in a few weeks' time. Obviously, we've got the rest of the 7 levers sequence episodes to roll out. Then maybe after that, we can kind of come back and talk about how the whole framework fits with the whole framework of a traditional sort of sales funnel.
That's a great idea for a show.
I will note that down.
Good one.
What about you, mate? How's the UK been treating you? Because I know you've been back there again recently. You basically almost moved back home to the UK and no longer in Spain almost.
No, it's not really that bad. I got bored of the rain and came back.
Fair enough.
Yeah, no, it's going great. It's going great. Doing good stuff, helping clients out, doing some, real. Again, it's interesting to be involved in other people's businesses. I know you've said it before. With the consulting work that you do. That when you've made time for members of the Preneur community and you've done those calls that you do, it's very interesting to see other people's businesses. It's great for me. It's great to be able to help people. It's great to be able to put all the knowledge I've got into good use to help other people and, move their businesses forward. But all the time I'm learning as well. I'm learning about how other people are doing things, what problems they're seeing. I'm adding it all to my knowledge, which again just means that it helps me help the next person. So it's great, and I do like being, quite a practical, hands-on, in a practical, hands-on environment. So it's great. I'm really enjoying what we're doing. It's going quite well moving forwards. Oddly enough. Sales funnels for that process is something that we're now looking at, prospecting and things. Slightly different to what you're talking about, but it still is a sales funnel, and we're looking at those elements. So I think when we come back to the 7 levers mapping, maybe we'll look at that as a contrast to the things that you're talking about.
Sounds like a fantastic plan to get that holistic view and of how that all ties in together. Could be very cool.
Yeah. So the other staple of regular updates is what's on Pete's reading list.
Yeah, a couple of things the last week I've kind of been devouring. Well, the main thing is I've sort of been back on the Dan Kennedy bandwagon a little bit the last week and been listening to his, I think it's Mailbox Millions program, which was just a recording of an event he did a couple of years ago, just about offline marketing and doing direct mail and postcard marketing and that sort of stuff. We're doing a little bit, or about to roll out some of those sort of things inside the telco, some offline kind of marketing and some things like that. So I sort of wanted to get a bit of an idea of, what Dan's been doing and what his clients have been doing. And it's quite an interesting program because, at least the first couple of hours of content is him basically just showing a whole bunch of effective direct mail pieces, whether it's postcards or lumpy mail or sales or long form sales letters. And, it's just been this huge swipe file. There's not a whole lot of sort of, I guess you'd call it traditional teaching where he's on stage lecturing about theories and concepts and constructs and things like that. It's literally, okay, here's a good thing. This is what worked with this. Here's another cool thing. This is why this worked. Here's another cool thing. And it's quite interesting to sort of get bombarded with a whole bunch of just different real world ideas, which is kind of cool. So that's kind of been taking up a little bit of my time this week. So haven't been reading as much or listening as much. Finished off The Art of Learning the other week, and then listened to a conversation between Tim Ferriss and Josh Waitzkin, obviously the author of The Art of Learning. And he talks quite a bit because Josh now consults to high-end hedge fund traders and athletes and business people about high performance. And one of the things that they sort of covered in their discussion was around meditation. And it's been interesting, actually, because a couple other people have sort of spoken about meditation recently. I've sort of stumbled across a few other interviews of people just not searching it out, just sort of kind of coincidental, serendipitous type things. Russell Simmons, Jerry Seinfeld, a few other real good creative people have sort of mentioned in different circumstances that they really found meditation and helpful for them. So I've kind of been invested in a program and have been going through the steps of a daily or twice daily meditation practice, which has been really interesting. It's only been a few days now, but that's been fun off the back of the art of learning. In terms of this week's book recommendation, I'm going to do something a little bit different. It's not a book I've actually consumed yet. So I'm going to recommend something I haven't actually read, which is very rare. But it's for an author that we've had on the show before, and I do really respect and do converse with a little bit via email, Ryan Holiday. His new book, The Obstacle is the Way, which is a book on using Stoic principles or Stoicism and applying it to business and success. So it kind of has a tie into the whole meditation thing in a loose kind of way. But his new book's just come out. It's available on Audible, which is obviously a great sponsor of the show here. So if you want to get a copy of Ryan's book and you haven't tried Audible yet, you can get the book for free if you head over to audibletrial.com/PreneurCast. So AUDIBLE, Audible, trial.com/PreneurCast. You can get a sample and a taste of what Audible's all about by listening and downloading the book by Ryan, The Obstacle is the Way, and I've heard some really good recommendations from that. So I think my next Audible coupon appears in about 3 or 4 days' time, and I'll definitely be using that credit to get Ryan's book and have a listen to that over the next week or so.
All right, I'm intrigued to see what you get out of that, and we'll probably have a chat about it when you have finished it. I have to say, you came a little bit out of left field there. On the list of things I never expected you to say, I'm getting into meditation is quite high.
Well, see, I don't think that's that weird for me, to be honest. Particularly, obviously I'm into the sort of the vegan style lifestyle, or try to be as plant-based as I can, which ties in, obviously, with our conversation with Joe today. But I wouldn't have thought meditation's that much of a stretch. I did yoga quite a bit during university, and sort of meditation was kind of part of that practice, and I did it quite regularly. I started yoga for the stretching elements that was helping my triathlon racing at the time, when I was racing a bit more seriously than I am now. And meditation was part of that, and I really enjoyed it, then kind of lost my way, as they say. And yeah, looking at getting back into it, which has been enjoyable this week.
Yeah, no, hey, don't get me wrong. I have been a very strong supporter, proponent and practitioner of meditation for a long time. But if you look at us, the two of us, you I would have said people would see as the physical person.
Yeah.
Always on about triathlons and this, that, and the other, and me, I'm more the cerebral, mental
True.
person, and those two personality types tend to lean, traditionally, in those two directions. But yeah, no, it's great, and I'm hoping you're going to stick with it, and I'm hoping you're going to get the benefits from it. That certainly, I do.
Beautiful.
And as you said, all this stuff is connected, so that lets us do that really neat segue that we always like to do back to this week's core conversation, which is with Joe Cross. Now, there's a bit of a link in there to stuff that you've expressed an interest in before, and it was a very interesting conversation to me to listen to Joe and the journey that he took. There are a lot of things that I picked up out of this, but can you give a little bit of context to where this conversation comes from?
Sure.
Where Joe popped up out of, because at the beginning of the show, I mentioned he made this film called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. And it's kind of hard to make a bridge between that and the show.
Sure. Well, basically, I stumbled across this documentary a few years ago now. Joe, as he sort of touches on in our conversation, was overweight, working really, really hard. Basically, he was fat, he was sick, and, he was almost dead. And he went on this journey to basically change his diet through juicing. So juicing vegetables and fruit and all that sort of stuff. So he kind of, was able to sort of help change his life through that, and then decided to sort of go on this little journey and film a documentary about that side of diet and how it can help people and all that sort of stuff. And it's a really, really amazing documentary in its own right, and I really highly recommend everyone at least checking it out. Not to sort of go vegan, because it doesn't really preach a vegan message at all. It just preaches a get more juice in your diet message. And that's all well and good, but the thing that I wanted to sort of chat to Joe about was that he was a stockbroker in a past life, had one of Australia's largest stockbroking firms, sold it, became a consultant, obviously, and then fell into this documentary. But also the documentary has had, now I'm going to get the stats wrong, but I know Joe and I do cover it in the conversation, like 3 million downloads or viewers or 30 million viewers or something. Like it's a ridiculous number. And, it just intrigues me about, how do you make a documentary and get such huge exposure for it? I think, most people would know someone who's at least heard of the documentary or seen it. It has been that popular. So I think it was just intriguing to sort of see how this, Aussie guy has taken America and the world by storm and has written a number of books now and travels consistently to promote it. And it was just kind of seeing the business side of making, monetizing and promoting a documentary film.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit afterwards, as we usually do. But just a heads up, folks, this is not Pete and some other guy on some loving about health food and juicing and stuff like that. It really is actually a conversation about exactly as Pete says. And I really enjoyed this because it was about some big things this guy went through. It's an interesting story, an interesting journey that he's taken to do something that he really wanted to do and to come out the other end, the far end of it with, one, he's made a film, which is an achievement in itself. Anybody out there thinking that they want to achieve something big, this guy's gone and done it. But the lessons he learned, the perspective, it's just a very, very interesting conversation about that journey, as you say. So with that said, folks, we'll go over to Pete and Joe Cross.
Joe, thank you so much for joining us, buddy. I know you've got a crazy schedule at the moment.
No worries, Pete. It's great to be on the show, mate.
So San Francisco, down to California, and then continue the journey. Is that the plan?
That is. I'm in beautiful San Francisco for 3 more days, or the Bay Area, I should say, doing some public appearances in bookstores for my new book. I'm on the tail end of my book tour that started we started in January, and we're going to wrap up in San Diego end of next week. So that'll take me through right to the sort of middle of April. And it'll be a wrap, and then I head back to New York to finish off my new movie. So I'll be back in the edit for a couple of weeks.
Mate, a lot going on. I'd love to talk about the book tour and stuff because obviously, traditional book tours these days aren't done as much. And I know you are a big believer in traveling to promote stuff, particularly the original documentary, Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead, which I absolutely loved. And it's probably worth, I guess, putting everyone in context here, or everything in context here. Do you want to explain a bit about the documentary and kind of how this whole phenomenon actually started?
Sure. Well, I was not well. I was pretty sick on medication, and I wasn't on my deathbed, but I had a chronic illness, and I was taking pills every day, every morning, every night for 8 long years. And I was also, 145 kilos, which wasn't helping.
No.
And probably needed to be 100, not 145. And so I was fat, sick, and nearly dead, essentially, because I had high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and pre-diabetic. So, I wasn't looking good at 40. And I'd been, focusing on wealth, not health. And I decided, to turn my life around and really go back to Mother Nature and see what would happen if I just lived on plants for a while. And, of course, when I started telling my mates I was going to do this, a few of them said, you should film it. So the filming idea came late in the piece. It was sort of after the idea of I'm going to do this. It wasn't like I need to do a movie. What should I do? It was an afterthought.
Yeah.
And then once the film got cracking and I started getting into the world of making movies, I realised just how hard it was, and I didn't know anything about it, and how expensive it is when you don't know anything about something.
Absolutely.
So way. And I started that journey in late 2007, and it wasn't until 2011. So in 4 full years of being committed and, really focused on bringing this film to life, right from the production, the making of it, the starring of it, the editing, then the marketing and the packaging and the distribution of it all. I did the whole thing soup to nuts on my own. But when I say on my own, in my own, without distributors or any professional
backers, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I hired good people. I did hire.
I think that's an important lesson, but I want to get into that. But you mentioned, obviously, prior to the documentary and going plant-based with the drinking of the juicing sort of stuff, which is obviously the real message of the documentary, because you go through this journey that you went through and you travel through the States trying to, I guess, preach the message, not in a religious way, obviously, but preach the message.
No, I would say I don't try and preach, which is why the movie's been so good.
Fair point.
I would say that what I did was I just did my own thing and didn't try and preach. I think if anyone, like in business, goes to America and tries to preach, or goes to any country and tries to preach, I think you get thrown out.
True.
We've seen that. So what I did was I decided that I was going to just do this personal journey, and I thought if I'm going to film it, I should go to America, where there's a lot of people in America who might want to watch it, because Americans aren't too keen on watching stuff made elsewhere, whereas Australians and the British will watch anything anyway.
Yeah.
So I did that, and then that movie sort of, told the story of drinking juice and eating lots of fruits and vegetables and what can happen.
Mm. And you stumbled across some people on your journey that became really sort of the hero of the movie almost, didn't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, for those people that haven't seen Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead, I don't want to ruin it, but, we meet a truck driver who I met a lot of people, but he called me up 6 months afterwards and said, can you give me a hand? And at that stage, it was like, you know what? I promised all these people who would call, I'd help them, and he was the only one out of like 300 who did. So I thought I'll get back over there and see what we can do. And the movie takes a dramatic turn at that moment, and it's been a big success both here and internationally around the world. I think we're up to about 12 million people now that have watched the movie.
That's incredible. So, and I'm guessing, is that one of the reasons it took so long to develop, because you were going down one sort of path, and then 6 months later the truck driver kind of called you up and then went, this is a much better hook for the story, and went and obviously pivoted and made that change?
Well, yes and no. You're 100% right with the first section as to why it took so long. But you see, because I didn't know how to make a movie, I mean, I had a movie made, and that was my journey, and I was on time, on budget, ready to roll. And then when Phil called, you see, you don't know what he's going to do. I just thought we'll go and film him and put him into the credits.
Yep.
So the original idea was just for a little bit. But then this is where I got the inexperience of not understanding the whole game, is that once you start, it's hard to stop. Like, where do you pull? And so it then took another year of filming. And then, of course, you've got 500 hours of footage. So you've actually got another movie, basically. So that's why then it took another year in the edit to try and work out what to do. And a very expensive and costly process that I wouldn't change for anything, because it's created an incredible movement and given me a lot of joy. And obviously my health's more important than anything, and that's in great shape. But had I known what I know now, Peter, I could have done it a little bit more efficiently, mate.
Yeah. Well, obviously you mentioned you've got another one in the works, which I'm keen to hear about. But before we go down there, even before we go down the conversation of how you created this movement, because I think that word you used is on point. It's a huge movement with 12 million viewers and obviously the wider community. What were you doing beforehand? You mentioned you were focusing on wealth, not health. You kind of touched on it a little bit in the documentary of what you were doing prior to this in a past life, so to speak. What was your background?
I left school at 17. I didn't do uni. I didn't get the marks. I started working as a courier in the city of Sydney, couriering stuff around, and I was couriering stuff for a merchant bank called Elders Finance, the old days of John Elliott and Elders IXL. And I used to take stuff down to the futures floor. And I really liked the fact there was these guys screaming out there and shouting. I thought, I can do that. So I really wanted to get a job down there, and I got a job pretty quickly. And then I ended up being a runner on the floor instead of a runner around town.
Yep.
And I ended up being a trader and a local trader, and one thing led to another, and I, from 17 to 21, 22, I was actually pretty good at making money on the trading floor. So I decided to go out on my own at 22 and became a local member, which means you trade for your own account. So from 22 to 27, I did that. And then at 28, I started my first company, my first entrepreneurial sort of effort, and I founded a brokerage firm. And that brokerage firm went on to become the number one broker by volume and turnover in Australia.
Wow.
And I sold that company in 2007, just before the crisis. And with the proceeds from that investment, is what I actually built the movie on and built this company now that I'm on. But I did a bunch of other things in between. I did a lot of startups. Some worked, some didn't. Some were successful, some weren't, etc. And I did a lot of, I did some consulting for in media, and I was sort of like just a business guy looking at deals, opportunities, angel investor, entrepreneurial roles, and that so forth.
Very cool. So obviously you had one good focus, one good win, and then kind of scratching that entrepreneurial itch in various ways.
Yeah, parlayed it up. Exactly.
Nice. What was the biggest thing you think that you can look back on that you went, okay, from the trading days and building that business that actually helped you with the movie and this new movement? Is there any correlation you can think of?
Yeah, I think that to be successful as an entrepreneur, you need to have 4 things, 3 of which are in your control and 1 which isn't. And the 3 things that are in your control is you've got to be able to take risk, and I learned how to manage risk by trading.
Absolutely.
So risk and understanding risk is important. You've got to make huge sacrifice when you're building a business, and I learned that in the early days of starting a company and also investing in companies and managing and helping and mentoring CEOs. So I understand the whole situation of just how much sacrifice you've got to make. And then the third thing you've got to have to be successful is passion. You've got to be really passionate about what you do. And I was passionate about trading. I was passionate about the business. I loved the thrill of it. And so in what I'm doing now, it's a similar thing. I'm really passionate about getting this message out and spreading the word. And then the fourth thing, which is really important and not very much in our control, we can certainly make it happen a little bit more often than it does. We can put ourselves out there, but you need luck. And that's the same in trading in some respects, and also in what I'm doing now. And I got lucky. There's no question that Netflix wasn't around. YouTube was only a year and a half old when I made this movie. If I'd made this movie 10 years earlier, it would never have got the mileage it is now, because the distribution, the ability to have it streaming, to be able to seen by so many people wasn't available. So I got a bit lucky. Social media really helped my cause. Everyone was sharing, and at that stage, people were really interested in seeing what people were doing in their feeds on Facebook and so on. Nowadays, it's a little bit harder to get some kind of eyeballs on there, so to speak. People are a bit tired of it, a bit worn out by it. So I certainly was lucky in the timing of when I did this.
So you mentioned, obviously, growing it to 12 million views now of the documentary, and the ability of the web and social to sort of help do that. What was the strategy, and what were some of the things you actually did to reach that tipping point? Because obviously now people are loving the movie and they share it, and there is that viral sort of aspect to it now. But obviously with anything, you have to sort of somewhat manufacture that initial tipping point. What was the action points you worked on for that?
Well, I think, to be honest, if you look at sort of things, so why does something go viral? I think that the hard work and effort that I put in the edit room for the 4 years from 07 to 11 is what is the reason why it was successful when it went online and people reacted. Because if you have something where people react and they really love it and they're inspired and they want to go and do something, and they want to share it with their friends, and that's like a 99.9%, reaction, you are going to get something very viral very quick. Yeah. So the hard work was done in the edit room of getting the content in the shape that I wanted it to be in. Now, most people would have probably left 2 years earlier and not gone the 4. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And then what we would have had would have been an okay movie, but nothing that would be where it is now. So I don't think it was a case that I made something that wasn't good go viral. It had to be good in the first place. So therefore, when it comes to this kind of media, it was all in the work that was done over the 4 years. It was all of the long days, nights, effort, the continually searching to make it better, finding a solution, finding a way to fix that problem and solve this one, and et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So, and then once you have something that's like that and it's thrown out there into the universe, and in this case into the world of digital content, and it's just as very simple for someone to watch it and then share it with a click of a button, if it's good enough, it'll have legs.
Fair enough too. And you basically, the documentary is given away for free online. People can go and just watch it for free. There's no sort of paywall or anything like that, is there?
In Australia they can, yeah. In Australia it's on YouTube for free, yeah.
Okay. But overseas it's by documentary, pay-per-view kind of stuff?
Well, because Australia doesn't have a Netflix and doesn't have free streaming or doesn't have streaming by subscription,
yeah,
I just think it was unfair not to give Australians a chance to watch it if they wanted to.
Very cool.
So, had there been a Netflix type service where people were connected to, I would have done it. I'm not I'm happy to give it away free, but I didn't want to disadvantage people because Australia hasn't got a service,
Sure.
So
fundamentally,
in America, you've got to be you can watch it on Hulu for free, but you'll have to watch it with ads.
Yeah. And then there's Netflix and all those sort of various distribution platforms.
Yeah, Netflix is a subscription, so you've got to pay maybe $9, $15 a month, depending on how much what your rate is. But all of those places. I mean, Netflix is where people watch it the most.
Yeah, fantastic. So one of the things that I find fascinating, encouraging, awesome, I guess, if one of you three different words there, is that it's a digital distribution fundamentally of the movie. And obviously there's DVDs available and stuff like that, but you are literally hitting the ground. You said you're in San Francisco at the moment, heading down to San Diego, back to New York. You are, and have been, from what it looks like, traveling consistently for 3 or 4 years promoting this movement.
Yeah, because it's about touching the people. I mean, if you talk to some of the, and I'm not putting myself in the category of in excess or you too at all, Pete, but if you talk to these guys that are in that world, touring is what it's all about to garner a fan base. You got to put yourself out there. You can't sit back in your ivory tower. You got to go out there amongst the people, and you got to put the hard yards in. You got to go and listen to them and hear what they have to say. You can't live in a bubble if you're doing what I'm doing. So there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of people out there that are struggling with their weight, with their health, with chronic disease, with being poor and not being able to get the right nutrients into their bodies. And so if they can come along to one of my talks, we usually get 200-300 people in a store, which is free, and it goes for about 2 to 3 hours, including the signings and the photographs and all that sort of stuff with the lining up. That's a big night for them because it's a chance to meet other people as well as to just hear my story. And it's not preaching. If you were to come along, you would get the fact that I'm just telling my story and why I did what I did and what I've learned through experts. I don't proclaim to be an expert at all. I think if there's anything I'm trying to be an expert at, is to take complex and difficult things and make them simple for people to understand through my movies and TV and books.
That's awesome. So with the stores and actually going out there doing these tours, like I think a lot of people who kind of, as they grow their business and want to do, on probably a smaller scale than what you're doing it to start off with, at least. So with the stores and the appearances, are they done through like Breville dealers? I know you've got a relationship with Breville, which I'd be interested to chat about if you don't mind, or is it just you going to bookstores or how does that sort of function?
No, it's not done. The books has got nothing to do with Breville.
Yep.
The books is a situation where if you have a movie like I've had, you have awareness. And look, what I've tried to do very right from the beginning is to build my social network and to really connect with fans and to really anyone who's seen the film, give them a place where there's lots of information and support and ideas and others who want to do the same thing. So because my movie actually is about your health, it's about pro-action and it's a free thing and it's promoting fruits and vegetables, I've got a lot of things going for me. I'm not promoting these 3 pills you need to pay $14.99 for. And, you can watch my movie and get well and not pay me a dime. You can watch it for free on YouTube. You can go down to your local farmer's market. You can buy a juicer that's got nothing to do with Breville, and you can get well. And these are some of my greatest fans. They never paid me a dime, and I'm very, very happy about that. I mean, I think that's awesome because I'll have new movies and new TV shows, and hopefully they'll watch those, and that audience will grow, and maybe they'll tell 10 friends, and maybe one of them will come online and buy my book, or you know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
I think it's got to start with having respect for the community, which I do. So for me, going into a bookstore like Barnes and Noble and going to them and saying I'm going to draw these sorts of crowds, they're all over me to do it. Like I mean, to be honest. And I love Barnes and Noble, but we may have outgrown them on this tour because there's not a lot of room in their stores for what we're doing. So I think we could probably next time around fill up 500 to 1,000 seats in major cities.
Yeah,
and so that's another whole problem I've got to work out, because how do I fund an auditorium like that? I don't want to charge people, and so that presents its own problems. So I think that it's about at the moment at least, I still don't feel like I'm out in front from where I was. I mean, like I was probably behind the ball for the first 2 years. From 11 to 13, I was definitely behind because this thing got ahead of me. I had no idea it was going to be like this. So the whole thing got ahead of me, and I was scrambling, always trying to catch up rather than be proactive. I was being reactive to the community, And I reckon about 6 months ago, we got out ahead of it, finally, with a really good, solid team in New York. And I think now we've built the infrastructure. We've laid down the foundations. We've got an enormous amount of content, rich content. So, there's not really a question now, Pete, that anyone can come to after watching the movie and want to find out. Whereas if you watched the movie in 2011, there was nothing on the web at all to support you. Whereas if you watch it today, 3 years later, there's a plethora of information. There's 250,000 people in my online community alone that are there to support and help. We've got nutritionists, we've got video, we've got recipe books, we've got apps, we've got all these things now to support people. So it really is. I look at my company as like not a channel, but it's more like an output. We've got content and content is still valuable even in today's world. I believe it is, and we've got rich content that we share and give away. Some of it we charge for, and some of it we give out for free. And we are doing that to enable people to lead a happier, healthier, longer life by working out fun and interesting ways to get more fruits and vegetables into their body, whether it be juicing, blending, or eating. Yeah.
And that website you refer to is that's the rebootwithjoe.com site?
That's one, yeah.
Yeah. So with the whole book tour side of things, like obviously, as you said, you're not having to fund auditoriums because you're going to Barnes and Nobles and traditional bookstores and all that sort of stuff. For so many people these days, like that, even for book marketers, it's like inconceivable how you can justify that from a cost perspective, because obviously as big as this community is and as much as the movement's important to you, it's not a charity, it's not something you're doing for the sake of doing it. There is obviously a business around it, as you said. How do you monetize, or at least cover the cost of something like a global world tour that you're doing?
So what I mean, at the moment, I think I've sold 85,000 books in 2 months here in America.
That'll do it.
And that's. I mean, I think our books are somewhere around $15. Now, obviously, I don't get the whole 15 because they're in stores and whatever. But I'm self-published, and so and we got another print run about to go. So what I think for me, I mean, to fund what I'm doing is I have an assistant with me, and she does all the social media and the photos and all the helping and assisting with. When we're at groups getting photos, and because it's people turn up, they don't know want to take a photo, it takes forever. So we have a whole little system now organised at how to manage this and get it in and out as quickly as possible.
Awesome.
So it is expensive. It's not cheap. I'll give you that. But I also look at it as not just trying to make money on the book. I look at it as promoting the brand and getting a chance to connect with retailers, because today I was at Williams-Sonoma here in San Francisco. I spoke to their staff, about 300 of their staff, and then 2 days ago I spoke to 650 staff at Starbucks in Seattle. And so getting out on the road and connecting with these sorts of organizations, to have the opportunity to go into, say, Starbucks, for example, and try and build a relationship with the team up there, which is a great bunch of people. And they're only too happy for someone like me to come along and spend 2 hours at their offices talking and sharing my thoughts and views about how we're going to get more fruit and vegetables into our bodies.
Yep.
Because everybody's keen on the idea. Everybody actually is excited to work out ways and interesting ways they can make it more of a ritual and more of a habit rather than a chore. And so it's more, to me, I'm trying to create the luck, Pete. You see, I think that I've got a saying that Lady Luck follows a person of action. So I think if you go out and do the action, then the luck will come. So maybe I'll get lucky with Starbucks. Maybe I'll get lucky with Williams-Sonoma. Maybe I'll get lucky like I did with Woolworths in Australia and so on. So,
well, that's what I want to talk to you. And, I really encourage people to follow you on Twitter. You're at Joe the Juicer, so you can follow along with everything you're doing, not just obviously, attending one of these live events, but also seeing what you're doing and how you're growing the brand. So I think if people look at it with that lens as well, there's a lot to learn just from viewing your actions of how you are growing this movement, because, it is a huge movement, and I'm really, excited to see what you're doing and continually grow it. And one of the things that I just stumbled across, I'm going to guess about 12 months ago, maybe a bit longer, in my local Woolworths, which is a supermarket chain here in Australia, that they now have Reboot Your Life juices in stores. So there's a range of 4 or 5 flavours, and I'm really keen to see about how that all happened, because I was excited to see that. I was down at the beach house for a weekend with my mum, and I was like, oh, these juicy. I bought some juices, and they had some DVDs there next to the juices at the time. And I'm like, Mum, you should get into this, and got the DVD at the same time. And she was obviously very passionate about this now, and she's involved in the movement and juicing and smoothieing and all that sort of stuff. But how did that relationship with Woolworths come about? Because, that can be quite difficult to do, and starting out this other business being a juice company.
Sure. So when the movie first broke in America, we knew it was big. So we knew that it would be big in Australia.
Yeah.
And when you think about who's going to benefit the most out of the whole nation wanting to juice more, you got to think about the fruit and vegetable people are, because that's the input you need every day. And also the people who provide the machines.
Yep.
Now, because I used the Breville juicer in the movie just by pure luck, I just went into a store in New York and bought it because I knew the brand. I didn't have a deal with them or anything. They were very happy to support and work out ways that we can work together to promote their brand and to help me spread the movie, the movie, which they've been very, very gracious and helpful. And they're really great company, great partners for me to be involved with, and can't speak highly enough. And I'm very proud they're an Aussie company that's doing so well around the world. But with Woolworths, I happen to know a guy who used to work on the trading floor. His wife was a director of Woolworths. So I went through him to her and said, look, is there someone in charge of marketing there? I'd like to at least get in there and have a chance to tell them that there's an opportunity here, that if people see this movie, they might want to start juicing and get more produce. So after one meeting with this chap, really nice guy, he's no longer at the company now, but he's a terrific guy. He arranged for a screening for a couple of hundred employees of Woolworths. He said, let's put the movie on and let's see what happens. And as it turned out, about 87% of the people who watched the movie started juicing. So he went, wow, that's a pretty high number. And they got all excited about it, which they should have, and they did, and it was great. And so the head of produce, a guy called Paul Harker, who's a terrific fella, he said, why don't you try and do a juice, Joe? I said, I don't think you can do a juice, Paul, because, we want the juice to be fresh. We want it to be full of nutrients. We don't want it to be heated, da-da-da-da-da. He said, oh, no, there's an Australian company down in Melbourne called Pressure Fruit, and they've got a plant, this new thing called HPP, which is a juice pressurization plant, where instead of heating the juice, they put 98,000 pounds per square inch of pressure on it, and they effectively kill the microbes inside but keep the vitamins and the nutrients strong and stable. So I went and had a look at this, and once I realised what was going on there, I thought, this is fabulous. And Woolworths were very keen to get a branded Joe Cross or Reboot juice into the stores, and the company down there was only too happy to go into a license arrangement. So I just stood in the middle of Woolies and this Australian small business that's doing fabulous, by the way, and I did a license deal with the Pressure Food guys, and they basically have the relationship with Woolworths, and they distribute the product, and my name's on it, and I do what I can to promote and support it.
Fantastic. No, I'm a big fan of the. I think it's the Big Bang.
The Big Bang's a good one. I like the Red Raw and the spicy lemonade.
Yeah, beautiful. But there's like 7 or 8 different.
We have 8. We have 8 different flavours in the 350 ml, and we have 2 large 1 litres, and we're trying to expand that now.
That's very exciting. And this is sort of trying to, I guess, in potential sort of things you referenced with Starbucks, trying to get them to start selling this and less coffee. Is that kind of some sort of long-term goal?
Starbucks have got their own HPP plant. They've got a it's called Evolution Fresh, which is fabulous. And Jimmy Rosenberg is the founder of that. And I met Jimmy when I was at Starbucks on Monday. Terrific guy. He started Naked Juice over here in California like 30, 40 years ago.
Okay.
And Evolution Fresh uses the same technology that the guys in Melbourne do. And so I'm helping them over here spread the word on HPP.
Beautiful.
So it's all good.
Man, it's very exciting. So you one last thing. So I know you got plenty going on. Before we leave and wrap up here, I've got, I guess, two more questions for you. One is, what's next? You're obviously saying new documentary, new books. What is sort of coming up for the brand that people can kind of, once they have watched and Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead and taken action and bought that Breville juicer and gone over to the website and kind of got part of the community, what's next they can consume that you guys are producing?
Well, I've got the new movie coming out in September. That'll launch globally in September.
Yep.
And then I've got a TV show which is sort of about to start production, and that's looking very positive for next year for the PBS network over here, Public Broadcasting Service, which is kind of like the ABC in Australia.
Yep.
And that'll be a half-hour show per week, which is exciting. That'll go for like 16 weeks. And then I've got a movie number 3. I'm already planning and started work on pre-production of movie number 3, which will come out in September next year of 2015. So, I'm a media company, and my job is to create content that inspires, educates, and entertains. And so I figure the more content that I can create that ticks those boxes, the more people will follow, the more people will get involved, and then the stronger the brand, which means I'm able to do licensing deals, the bigger the e-commerce platform I'm building where people can transact on an e-commerce basis for health and wellness products. Mm-hmm. And then in the media revenue, I can be my third avenue of revenue, can be the media sales that I make. So books, DVDs, you name it, in terms of the way that media can be distributed, packaged and sold, I'll be doing it. So that's kind of the main game, I think, is to maintain the trust, maintain the integrity, and to try and keep the feet on the ground and ask the questions and find the answers to that the average punter out there wants to know, and find it in a smart, informative, interesting, and exciting, inspiring way.
Mate, absolutely love it. I think that's a great philosophy and obviously a very clear business model, which is really, really cool. So let me ask you the one final question that we ask everyone who comes on the show as a guest is, what's the question I haven't asked you that I probably should have?
The question you haven't asked me that you probably should have. Well, probably if you're talking about business, then I think that when you're talking to entrepreneurs, the hardest thing for entrepreneurs is and can be the exit. Like, it's how do you monetize all this hard work? How do you create it to a position where you can sell it, given that you're the brand?
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing. So I don't have an answer for you just yet on that. The question is, it's going to have to be very diverse, and I'm going to have to work out ways to bring other talent in and possibly do that. But I think what's an interesting question. You can always paint all the things that you think are going great, but when some of the tough questions that I'm still trying to find the answer to, if you get asked those questions, then the person's done their work, or at least on the same wavelength. Not saying you haven't done your work, Pete, but you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
It's like when you talk to entrepreneurs, I think one of the questions that you can always ask them is, how do you plan to get out of this trade? If you're building something to monetize and you're an entrepreneur, that means you're excited about other things in the world as well. And how do you do that?
Absolutely.
So I haven't worked that out yet, but I've got some ideas, but we'll have to wait and see how big I can make it, because it's got to be big before I can get out. It's the funny thing about these sorts of businesses. If they're small, they're not worth anything. They get to a tipping point where they're actually massive and they're worth a lot, but there's not much in between.
No, absolutely. There might be some cash flow, but not a lot of actual exit opportunity.
There's not a lot of PE.
Absolutely. So people can follow along if they want to see what you're actually doing and how you get to that massive size community and business. Joe the Juicer on Twitter.
Thank you, Pete, mate. It's been great to be here. Rebootwithjoe.com, and we're looking forward to sharing the new movie with all the Aussies and everyone else around the world late in September.
So I enjoyed that conversation. I don't think it's quite as in-depth, business-oriented as we would normally get from someone that you talk to, but it does give a very interesting perspective. One of the things I really picked out that stood out to me was something that it's a topic close to my heart, and it's this idea that he was midway. Well, he wasn't even midway. He was, as far as he was concerned, he was done, and then he went through what you both called a pivot. Something happened, some evidence came to him, some information came to him, and he completely switched direction from where he thought he was going, and he was almost done. Now that's something that, it's something that I've talked about before from, reading The Lean Startup, and just from generally, it's my general experience. And in fact, I go through this with clients sometimes, you find yourself in that situation where you've gone a long way down a path, and one of the hardest things you can do is stand there one day and go, we're not going any further down that path. We're going over there because that is the right thing to do. And I've got all due to the guy, hat off to him. He saw that opportunity to do what he believed to be the right thing, and he completely changed direction. So it was really great to hear that, and the result that he got from it. So I found that particularly interesting out of that conversation. Yeah,
I think so too. I think there's a lot of things to take away from a very high-level strategy sort of stuff. We didn't get into the minutiae of how do you promote a documentary and here's a 7-step guide or anything like that. But it's just the high-level strategy stuff, because something that was really interesting that I heard Josh Waitzkin say actually. And I'm going to get this wrong, and I was listening to it while I was driving, so I couldn't stop and write down the quote. But he basically said, and I'm going to get this slightly wrong, but tactics are irrelevant if you haven't internalized the strategy.
Yeah.
And this is sort of why these sort of conversations are important, because you could sort of talk about here's the 7 steps for doing a documentary, but they are kind of irrelevant. The tactical steps are irrelevant if you don't have a high-level strategy and understanding of the fundamentals. And that's kind of applied to what Joe did. And I think it's applicable to a lot of stuff we talk about here on the show, which is so important.
I think that's spot on. That is absolutely spot on. That there's lots of different ways of saying it. We talk about things like, commander's intent, that kind of stuff, all these different concepts that we bring out. But at the end of the day, there are lots of different ways of getting where you're going, but you've got to know where you're going. And as long as you've got a solid understanding of where you're going, what your goal is, what the overall strategy is, then you can get there. And sometimes you realize that you're no longer heading towards that goal, and you need to pivot. But yeah, it's a great thing that you point out. It really was. I think some people maybe need to go back and listen to it again if they didn't get that strategic approach from it. Because I think you and I both definitely got the same thing from that conversation, that high level strategy and the drive as well. That project went on for a long time. He was absolutely committed to that. And that is really also a very important thing. I heard somebody else talking about that recently. Some of the important factors of being an entrepreneur, and that came up again. The drive, the perseverance.
Yeah.
So it was great, and just quite an inspiring story.
Absolutely.
So, cool.
So as usual, just wanted to wrap up the show and really say thank you to everyone who listens to the show, who downloads the show, who leaves iTunes ratings, because obviously, we hopefully give you some value in the hour or so we do every week. And, if you can return the favor with investing 2 minutes for us and take time and go to iTunes, just, on the phone or Android app, whatever it might be, whatever app you're actually using to listen to the show, if you can rate and review the show, it would be really appreciated as a small return gift of 2 minutes of your time. Also, in terms of giving to each other, we have our usual contest, which we run every week over at PreneurMarketing.com. If you've got a feedback on this episode, if you've got some thoughts, if you've read a blog post recently that you've enjoyed and want to contribute to the community with, every single week we give away a personally signed copy of my first book, How to Turn Your $1 Million Idea into Reality, the book I did with Wiley, personally signed, sent to your front door in regular mail for the best blog comment of the week. So it could be on an old blog post, a current blog post, a podcast episode, whatever it might be. Leave a comment over at PreneurMarketing.com with a question or a feedback or a suggestion or whatever it might be. And every week we pick a winner and we send you a personally hand-signed copy of my book.
Cool. And absolutely, I totally agree. And I just want it to come from me as well, that we really do appreciate you folks tuning into us on a regular basis, listening to the show and providing that feedback. We love to know that we're doing okay. We love to know that we're giving you great stuff. And I personally also appreciate the feedback about things like my accent, my interview technique, and all the other things that you talk about as well. It's great to get the feedback, know how we're doing. So please do leave us a comment and get yourself a copy of Pete's book at the same time.
Cool. Well, next week, what's happening? Next show. What's on next show, mate?
On the next show, we are going to be continuing our series about the different elements of the 7 levers. And next week, we're going to talk about possibly one of the most contentious ones of the 7, which is raising your average sale price.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. But we're going to, as always, try and make it as easy as we can for you to pick out an idea that you can go away, implement, get that 10% increase, and work towards doubling your profit using the 7 levers framework.
Cool.
So with that, we will be back soon with the next show.
We'll see you then.
You've been enjoying another fine episode of PreneurCast with Pete Williams and Dom Gocher. Make sure to hang out with the boys online at www.preneurmarketing.com or drop them a line via PreneurCast@preneurgroup.com.